Hello, people. I moved some stuff around on my desk, so let me see if I don't pile drive my setup with my flailing arms. This week, I read The Making of Oliver Cromwell. Now, I know this character. I say character; it's an actual person. Okay, this is actual history. You go along, you're meandering yourself through some very fun, always very fun, British history. And in amongst it, you come up with a name called Oliver Cromwell. Now, the part I saw that got my interest is they somehow, after he was dead, dug up his bones, put him on trial, found him guilty, and then hung his bones. All right, that was the first tidbit of knowledge that came to me about Oliver Cromwell. So I'm like, this cat's got to be interesting, right? So time goes by, and then this book finds me. Right, it's on your Ye Old Audible Plus membership. So I did not buy it. I don't think I will buy it, but it is still interesting. There's a lot sort of about Cromwell. He ended up in charge of England. But not a lot is written about early Cromwell, right? Which is unusual in any sort of world leader. Usually you know a lot about him from the youth on up. People are interested. They write about it. They keep track of it. This kind of thing, right? So this book is about the early part of his life. Sort of everything we can find out that happens before, sort of the trial against the king, which is the famous part. The part that would be made a movie out of, right? So in that sense, I can't highly rate it even as a history. Some histories are more exciting than others. This one's more of a slower history. So I'd say a low 3 out of 5. I can't give it a 2. I just can't. It's historical. The man did research. Everything you read in it can be, carried around as a fact. So that's got to be worth something. But for a general readership, right? It's highly select. You probably already know if you're going to like it. If you're wondering, then you probably won't like it, right? You got to be pretty into some history to want to read this. So, highly skippable sort of early history of Oliver Cromwell. And that's sort of how the book starts. The author makes a big point to say this, where he finds it very unusual that we know so little about this person, about his early life. We kind of know who some of his teachers were, but not a lot about their relationship, if it had a major impact on him or not. We don't know the areas of study, this kind of thing, right? Now, some of this is, okay, so things got heated in England. There was a civil war. Out of this civil war comes your Oliver Cromwell. He then dies. Now, this part, well, it is in the book, but only in relation to how it affects this early years, which is, again, I like the writing. He doesn't get sidetracked. But it bears on the unavailability, maybe, right? Because after he dies, they reinstitute the monarchy. There was no king for a bit, then there was one again. And then that new one sort of was salty that he killed his dad or whatever. And so then it came into fashion to say bad things about Oliver Cromwell. Things maybe were destroyed. People who could have written and known didn't, and then they became lost. This kind of thing happened, right? So you have to sift through non-existent. What is there may be biased against him, this kind of thing, right? So you have this hurdle as a historian, and he lays that out for you. So you know it going in. He also has a thing where as he goes, he gives you good descriptions of, I guess, British countryside. You get a good feel, you can almost smell ye jolly old England as you go along. It makes it less, what is it, by the numbers, right? Less of a, if he doesn't have these side descriptions, it's almost like a textbook. But he does have them. So Cromwell, has very little interest in school early on. He's not highly academic. He's not distinctive in any way, particularly in his youth. You don't see a star athlete. You don't see the dynamic personality. You don't see any of the things that would lead you to think, here's future king, ruler of England, right? You also, his early concerns are personal and more financial than anything. Like a Napoleon, right? Where early on, you don't get the sense here could be the person to run all of France, right? Because they're small issues. He got an inheritance. He's maneuvering properties. Nothing major though. No fame, no grand accolades, no anything like this. Now, along the way, he becomes a Puritan. And I think they're not exactly sure what did it. Some people say it was fake, right? Some politicians would fake that sort of thing. But this was an era of honor, an era where you believed in ghosts, the Reformation, Protestant versus Catholic. Heated times. I don't know that many people would fake it. And if they did, I don't know that they would trick many people. But in any case, I think one of his kids had ye old smallpox or something like this, some ailment. And the kid living, he I guess did one of those, I'll pledge myself to God if my kid lives. This kind of thing, I think. Something to this effect happens. In any case, there is a turn where he's just a normal sort of dude, and he turns Puritan. And Puritans are like super Christians, I guess you would say, in that time. So you'd have your Catholics, Latin, the regulars. The Protestants are more modern, I would say. I would give that description, where we don't have to say the old hymns in Latin. We don't have to bow to the Pope, etc. And then the Puritans are just like, die hard. You all aren't worshiping right. You all should go harder. This kind of thing. Probably more like a Jesuit in Spain, but less, Inquisition-y. This kind of thing. There's one side story where they say after the Puritanism hit, he wanted to go to America. And it just didn't work out. And I just thought, it's always funny with these sort of world leader types where there are these moments that could have shifted in a large way. So Cromwell in America, would he have just gotten lost? Would he and his family have been this driving force in the future of the country? I'm not exactly sure. Not exactly sure. Another side issue that we have, I say side issue, the first chapter covers a lot of background, right? And some of the background is King Charles. Now this king is a bit of a goober. Oh, he has like the wrong timing. He makes the wrong move. Things don't work out for him. Sometimes a world leader is very temperamental, and then that spark comes up and does a good thing. That's not Charles. Every time he lets his emotions go, he gets too prideful. Every time it always sort of backfires on him. That's his sort of history. He is the one in charge when all these things are happening with the Reformation, etc., etc. And you have parts of the kingdom that want to break away. You have his own parliament who wants more autonomy to run things. They shouldn't be subjected in every sense to a king, especially a king who uses their money and wastes it. I think at some point he's just flat started, taking the money from the church because he needed to fund more wars that he was losing. He he would constantly agree to things, right? Was it the Magna Carta? Do I want to say it's the Magna Carta? It wasn't the Magna Carta. It was like a reissuance of the Magna Carta, or some bolstering of it in some way, right? Well, in any case, he would say, "All right, I'll agree to this, this, and this," and then when they leave, he just changed his mind, right? He really had it in his head that whatever he inherited of kingship needs to be defended from these people. This kind of thing. That was his thinking. In any case, that's what led to ultimately your civil war breaking out, in which our Cromwell plays a part. We have I think it was a Catholic Irish revolt. Now, the English historically looked down on the Irish, so that doesn't help the cause. But the Catholic part, all the British types, the British people, were inclined to think that's like an international conspiracy, right? That the Pope spurred this on to make everything worse. It just added to the flames. I think he went over into there. No, I don't think he fought in there at this time. I think he fought them later when he was the crap in charge. And this is what the book does a good job of. You get a good sense of the person, which is what a sort of a history biography types. That's what they should give you, right? He's Cromwell now. Cromwell's he's like temperamental. He'll run really hot. He's strong, robust, healthy. And all these personality traits just seem to funnel into his Puritanism. So when he gets, so he'll hang out with a group, right? Politically or in an army. And he won't rock the boat. He doesn't come in thinking, I should be in charge of everything. But when the objective is such and such, and you being Manchester or Hull, whoever these other people are, when you're lazy or incompetent or not, you're slow, when opportunities are missed, you become the focus for him of all that energy that he has. And then he turns from like nice to, he'll really bury you deep. He has that kind of hot and cold to him. Fair, but, heavy-handed in a lot of ways. Now, they know he's the one. Things started popping off. The Irish Catholic rebellion. He's the one who stands up in Parliament and says, we need a defense of the country. We need to raise an army. They all saw the king, the king slowly making his way out of town. Everyone sort of knew what was up. But it was him who said it. A lot of times that can be... There's a lot of fence riding in politics, right? And you see that there's a go-getterness to him, right? Where he doesn't carry the fear a lot of these other people carry. He got himself, or earned himself, because, in those times you'd say civil war, and then a bunch of these people from Parliament go run the armies, pay for the armies, etc., etc. He gets in charge of a cavalry unit. Then we get a description of the cavalries, which is just wild. You got dudes riding horseback, knee to knee. I think they would try and interlock their legs to stay together. You run in, shoot a guy, chuck that gun at his face or at another guy, pull a sword, and start hacking at people, right? That was the plan until things went to crap and then everyone goes fleeing in different directions. At least that's what you try and do. Who knows what ended up happening once the bullets start flying. So he got in charge of one of those, not the cushiest job. And he, of course, once he sees the objective, he goes head first into it. He's very gung-ho. And throughout, right? Because the book gives you multiple battles. The battle on this hill, the battle, what is it? Hills around Norfolk, Hull, the River Ouse. I mean, literally individual battles. And as best as he can, because again, your Cromwell appears and reappears and disappears a lot of times through the history. If he was on the right wing and leading this charge, he'd try and tell you that. He would then try and tell you how. Okay, so here's Cromwell on the right. He leads it. They have a victory over the Royalists. And then pamphlets start getting made, because that was a big deal then. And credit starts trying to be given to your Lord Manchester, overall commander of the army. This sort of thing happens more than once throughout the Civil War battles, where somehow Cromwell ends up known, but not. He's like 5th, 6th, 12th in line for credit. And yet somehow he's the one who ends up in charge. He ends up running the country. Now, what I think our author's sort of presenting the mystery, and you're sort of left to wonder why. He didn't really state it himself, because that's not covered in his book. But if you look at what else there is, other facts, right? He has an ability to get troops to love him. You see it in how well his side always ends up performing, right? The right flank would do good, or he'd get more, and then they would do good. There was a time when there was a lag. So the king's out here, and they're trying to stop him, and the queen has her own army she's trying to lead to meet up with them, and they're trying to prevent that from happening. In the interim, she blocks supply lines, so the money can't get to the soldiers. And some commanders are like, just give me an IOU. Notoriously hard to get your pay back for an IOU. Others, just maybe let him loot towns. He went out of his way, even using personal credit, to pay his troops. At one point, I think his mom is asking for money to send to him for the cause. And that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's an example, I think, of how he might have treated his troops. You treat them with respect, lead them by the front line. You're as vigorous as they are. You share in their burdens. You're a higher up, but you care about us and you fight for our cause when it comes to the higher ups. Because we all know the boss level people can forget about the little guy, right? This sort of thing happens. And there's one point where he's fighting a guy, gets knocked off his horse, and when that happens, usually you're dead, because there's a bunch of horses charging all around. Someone can just ride up and cut you. But his guys rally. They notice that he falls, rally to him, and then save him. Right? So in the middle of the chaos, all the guys care enough, without the call being made, to go save him. Right? So you see clearly this ability to get troops, to get soldiers to like him. Now, clearly that had an effect after, because if you control the army, you can do a lot. He also, again, that ability to work under other people, but then sprout out at the right time. So in the army, he's not against anyone. He'll play the part. He's for the cause. But then when the crap hits the fan, someone has to be blamed. Now, he knows he did his job. Other people might be dirty politicians, just don't want the heat. But they let him say, as our commander. That was probably accurate. Manchester was probably lackadaisical. But then people rally politically behind him to not take the heat. Because I'm like, well, if he's going to say it's him, let's go with that. And if it doesn't work, well, we'll say it was Cromwell's idea to blame him. Right? The initiative. He always takes the initiative. He does the same in Parliament, where they'll be like, like your gang of five or whatever dumb crap. They have ideas and they group up to similar ideas. And then there's an enemy to those ideas. He will be the first to come out and say something specifically to that person. Then the fight rallies around that action, so to speak, right? It's the same in military, where I think one general said this, a modern general, because they were like, do you ever get nervous making a decision, doing something? He says, no. He goes, right or wrong, my job is to make a decision. And if it's wrong, we have people to fix that. And then if it's right, we get all the benefits of it being right. But he goes somewhere, and the idea being that someone along the chain has to do something. We can't just sit here. Right? Which is another aspect to this book here that I've noticed in a few spots, historical spots. And that is, so you're living life normally, and then war starts. Now this is a war footing, and then at some point you go back to normal life. Well, wars aren't just politicians wanting wars a lot of the times. A lot of the times, the people want a war as well. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Right? So, if you're a politician, you can live in the world without war. But when the war starts, you need to be now a warrior. And a lot of those tendencies are anti-politician. So I see a lot where it clashes, right? Same in this book. You have the higher lords, not so much Fairfax, but your Manchester, really. Comes up a lot. Where it is a civil war, meaning half the country sort of wants it. I want to fight for the rights of Protestantism in this country. I want to fight against the dirty Catholics. Right? So, when your Cromwell rushes right out of Parliament to get involved, the people see that. When they see a commander hesitant, then they get annoyed. They're like, well, we signed up to fight this war, and this guy's not fighting it. But this guy is, right? I see this happens in the Civil War as well, our American Civil War, where, to degrees, you have a lot of the gumption, a lot of the drive for fighting coming from the people themselves. And if you have a commander like a Cromwell who is like that, who carries that energy with him, then I can see why, along with the other things, he would end up in charge of the mess when the king is gone. Because without seeing that, he almost comes out of the ether. I'm like, there's a shadow, he emerges from it fully formed, right? If you just look at other histories. But you start to see these building blocks because of this book. I forget the siege. Siege of York or Newcastle. I forget which one it is. I think Newcastle. It gets tricky in my mind because you'll have like a town named Newcastle, and then a Lord Newcastle, and then like his son Newcastle, or his grandfather Newcastle. And you're like, hold on, I got confused. In any case, there was one big siege that sort of set everything off. Not set everything off. It was like the linchpin, so to speak. I wanted to say Newcastle. I'm not sure. In any case, it's not long after that siege. Here's your king. Here's Prince Rupert. Rupert's very good tactically. He's won some fights. But the king is his final say. So at some point, the king's like, okay, you're to fight him, but if he doesn't show up, you turn and meet up with the rest of the army. There's a miscommunication in what he sees. And so instead of taking a fight he could have and maybe winning, he goes to link up following orders. In the course of linking up, he has a battle with Cromwell and loses it. So, and again, we go into a lot of in-depth about how this battle was lost, who's responsible, what the history says. It's good knowledge. So he loses that battle. Weakened state, king, siege. They decide to make a move, right? And at one, we boil it down to one hill where the intelligence tells him they're leaving, they're fleeing. So you can go fight them. So he goes to fight them, but it wasn't fleeing. They were just turning around for a second. So instead of fleeing enemy, he's face to face with an enemy. And it's Cromwell. And it goes bad for him, right? I think the king blames the prince a lot harder than he needed to. In any case, that's sort of where our book ends. And then we get a solid chapter of the root ideas that we end up having about Cromwell. Oh God, oh God. I touched it. I shouldn't have. It's not a long book. I say battle heavy, but they're good descriptions of battles. And then good descriptions of the aftermath of battles. Both for glory and for blame. These are natural things that happen every time there's a war that happens. Someone gets credit, someone gets the heat, etc., etc. Bleeds right into politics. But it's clearly a book limited in what it wants to deal with. And I don't mind it. But again, a lot of people might. So it's not highly recommended. I don't think I will buy it. But it's there if you get interested. Okay, it's a short video, short book, short ads. These are my books. I wrote them. You can buy them. You can read them. It'll help the channel. Or you can subscribe. Or you can just keep watching. I'm fine. Either way you go. Okay. Okay. I'll see you people next week.